Welcome to the Perpetually Unsatisfied. May you always know the perpetualness of unsatisfaction in any acquisition and in any loss. That might not sound like a blessing as much as a curse, but really, it's a statement that is pointing to something that is entirely beyond either blessing or curse. If by blessing you mean something which is meant to counteract a curse, and by curse, something which is meant to counteract a blessing. There's something here which is not capable of being either augmented or diminished. And it's this very essence, something that you are looking for, that everybody is looking for. And because it cannot be found as an object of mind, insofar as it is sought as an object of mind, which it will be as long as the mind is searching for objects, either to gain a new object to be satisfied with in terms of experience, or to locate some object within itself to discard or throw away as the culprit of unhappiness. There will always be that perpetual looking, searching, whether out here for a new object or a new experience, whether a very dense, gross experience, as in dense, or a very subtle, lofty experience of trance induction or a so-called higher state, which, upon the acquisition thereof, one wants to capture, to hold, to not lose, and so therefore it's simply another object, or to identify within some object of antagonism to get rid of, after which the remaining parts of the inside are supposed to be whatever they're supposed to be, freer, happier, more capable of being enjoyed as objects. But finally, what's discovered, if there is vigilance, watchfulness, is that whatever new experience or object is acquired and brought into oneself to bring about more joy or more happiness or finally peace at having had one's expectations of what it will feel like to finally be satisfied met, what happens with every new object that is acquired is that that object becomes a thing of custom. You become used to it, and therefore no longer fascinated or thrilled by it. Because it has a beginning and an end, not only as an object, but the very faculty of happiness or enjoyment through experience itself has a beginning and an end, as all experience repeated becomes an agent of dulling and desensitization of the brain. If you have some experience, it doesn't matter what it is, and you enjoy it, and you go out to seek it again, to repeat it, every time that experience is repeated as an object of chasing, acquisition, the brain is desensitized, and more is required, wanted. And if you go the other route and say, let me identify the object of pain inside of myself and remove it, as soon as that object is identified and removed, what happens? You're still left with what's there. And there may be a temporary relief, as in when removing a splinter or some other kind of irritant from the body. And yet then too, one becomes eventually desensitized to that feeling of relief, which was a temporary feeling of relief. And that itch returns, and you then may look back inside of yourself and begin removing other objects. And every time you remove a new mental object, there is that feeling again of, ooh, a temporary relief. But finally, if you see that you can go on removing mental objects indefinitely, or go on acquiring new mental objects indefinitely, whatever the short-term thrill or sensation or satisfaction of the removal or the acquisition of any particular object, the total object of the mind itself remains. Forever unsatisfied. Forever unsatisfied. Whatever object the mind loses or gains, whether it gains something favorable or unfavorable as per its deduction, or whether it loses something favorable or unfavorable as per its deduction, it remains perpetually in that cyclical movement of looking, seeking, wanting, and there's never any satisfaction in that. So when that's finally seen, it's the mind itself which is the culprit, or which appears to be the culprit. And if you look at the mind just as it is, as an appearance and a disappearance, along with everything else, the everything else which is only known through the mind, as the mind, by the mind, and so therefore is the self-same as the mind, is just there. Just there. It may be sparkling and scintillating and dancing and moving, going toward, going away from, but it's just there. The trouble arises when there is an addiction to the story of the mind, an addiction to the patterning of the mind, an addiction to the sensations produced by the mind, which are all finally revealed to be a cover. The mind itself, which is sensation, is a cover over what's here. And not just here, but here. To point here is really to point everywhere, all at once. You finally can point everywhere and anywhere. It doesn't matter where you turn. It doesn't matter what you're pointing at or where you're looking. You're only ever pointing at God. You're only ever pointing at yourself. You are only ever pointing at the same thing. You are only ever looking at the same thing. You're only ever hearing the same thing. You're only ever saying the same thing. So, as long as you're looking, you're looking. As long as the addiction to searching is there, it's there. But even that addiction to searching is just another part of the mind. And so what you see is the mind, which has split itself up. The mind is a thing divided. Not really, but really. The mind is one thing, it's one movement, it's one happening. But in the experience of the mind is divided, compartmentalized, cut up, trying to destroy itself, to run away from itself, which it can't. And so the mind is perpetually trying to both destroy itself and preserve itself. And to continue what it calls creating. However, the mind's apparent power of creation, maintenance, and destruction is a lie. It's an illusion. There's nothing created, there's nothing maintained, and there's nothing destroyed. The mind has no true power, other than the power of image, the power of projection, which is the power of story. And the power of story only holds power within the field of the mind. The story projected by the mind, all of the sensations that comprise the mind, the very sensation that is the mind, has no actual power to change reality. The image gets changed, and the image is reacted to, and is treated, is regarded as reality for all intents and purposes, but it is not real reality. And no matter what happens within the field of the mind, no matter what happens within the field of the mind, no matter what story is told, no matter what actions appear to take place or not take place, the basic, essential, fundamental nature of what is untouched, can't be touched, can't be distorted. It can't be grabbed and objectified, nor can it be rejected as an object. In fact, it can't be grasped or rejected at all. So the mind, thought, is only capable of grasping or rejecting thought itself, and it can't even do that entirely. For if it could, it would dissolve itself, and it clearly doesn't have the power to do that. No matter how much the mind wills to destroy itself, it can't. The mind's very will to destroy itself is its very perpetuity into the future. So the mind's desire to destroy itself is actually its impulse to continue rebirthing itself, maintaining itself. So the mind, as the mind, by its very structure and nature, is schizophrenic. As long as the mind appears, there is movement, there is pulling in different directions, one thing trying to divide itself, but it is simply image, which is both divided and really undivided. There's the appearance of division, but it's one field of image, it's one field, and there are lines in it, and we say here's where this ends and here's where something else begins, but that's all an illusion. The mind itself is even indivisible from the field of eternity in which the mind appears and disappears. And in awareness of this field of eternity, the mind itself is seen to not even be there. It's an illusion. The mind itself isn't even real, which means that both pain and pleasure are of the nature of illusion. Suffering is of the nature of illusion. Ignorance is of the nature of illusion. All division is of the nature of illusion. And yet it appears. Time appears. Space appears. Distance appears. The physical world appears. And there's an apparent physics to it. And everything that appears of the nature of physics, time, space, and form, has a certain parameter to it, apparently. And there's no problem, unless the parameter is grabbed onto by the mental faculty, and there's an attempt to manipulate it for some gain, or to avoid some loss. There's no fruit to that. There's the promise of fruit, but the fruit never arrives. It's always out there somewhere. No matter what the mind promises, it's always out there. Or back there, and you missed it. You missed some pleasure, right? Or out there, there's the promise of some pleasure to be gained. And there's the running. But what is it that is so determined to have pleasure? It's the pain of the mind, which wants to cease being pain. And yet it cannot cease to be pain. And the pain that it is will be there as long as it continues to believe in its own erroneous and false existence. That very pain, that very essence of the mind, is the essential belief in separation from God, from love, from life, from truth. And that's the very essence of all religion, that you are separate from God, and that you must struggle and strive to get back to that by adhering to our rules and our legislature and our etc., etc. And of course, it doesn't yield. You might get praised by people in a group. They might put badges on you and they might mark you, and they might give you lofty titles. But whatever is given to you, whatever you acquire, whatever you lose, that feeling of dissatisfaction, that feeling of not quite being there, that feeling of being an imposter, that feeling of being fake, doesn't go away. It can't go away as long as the mind is there and as long as the mind is believed in. That's part of it. It must stay. So finally, we move into a terrain, a territory that is unmarked, unmapped, unsubstantiated, and quite frankly and literally unsubstantial in the way that the mind seeks substance. It can't be marked, and so therefore it can't be stamped or signed or approved. It can't be consecrated. It's already sacred. It can't be validated. It can't be confirmed. Not really. There can be a moment, such as this one, of confirmation, of the awareness of that which doesn't come and go. But if this moment of confirmation is grabbed onto as another experience, or as a badge of honor, or as that final signature that you need on your cosmic passport in order to finally trust yourself enough to cash in, the moment you actually cash in that cosmic passport, you have to give up the passport with all of your stamps and signatures and all the beauty of it, the proof that you can show people, see, look, I traveled here and I've been to this dimension and I've been to this teacher and I've been to this station and I've been exalted in this realm and in this domain and I've been given these titles and I've traveled here, and the passport that shows your whole cosmic, not simply itinerary, but that which you have done, supposedly, right? According to the field of time. And yes, of course, within time, you've gone here, you've done that, you've had the experiences, you've been exalted, you've been given the titles, you've been given the stamps and the signatures, it's all there. But finally, at the end, you have to give that up, you have to cash that in. Otherwise, you can't walk through the door. And the temptation is to want to stick with that which is provable, demonstrable to another, as opposed to being with that which is true, which is eternal, which is actually the living, not merely embodiment, but the living essence of freedom, which need not be named, can't be marked, can't be proven or disproven. It's immeasurable. And so all the tokens of the mind have to finally be given up, surrendered back to the source. And in that, you see that the only game you can play by walking around flashing your badges and your degrees and your tokens and all your stamps and your passport, the only people that are impressed by that are simply people that haven't gone there yet. You can't impress somebody by the fact that you speak a certain language if they also speak that language. You can't glamorize somebody that's also been there. And so it's very easy. This is why cults can start, because somebody can simply come and say, yes, I have tasted cosmic consciousness and I will give it to you. And people that have never tasted that, but who have heard that, if you've never heard the word cosmic consciousness, it may interest you, it may not. But if you have heard something like that and you're chasing it, it's no different than somebody saying, I am a billionaire and I will teach you how to get $1 billion too. And everybody that's lusting, craving after $1 billion will come gather around. And of course, the way that that person acquired what they say they've acquired, if they've even acquired it at all, is not any way that they can really teach you. And so you see it all the time. Somebody comes around and says, I'll teach you how to make $1 million, and they don't even have $1 million. Or they do, but what they're teaching you has nothing at all to do with the process that they actually went through, which, if they were honest, was something in so many ways quite entirely out of their hands. Because they didn't make this earth, and they didn't make the air they breathe, or the sun shining above their heads, or the very space in which all of this appears. They didn't make the trees. They didn't even make the money. They didn't build the house in which they live or farm the food that they eat. They didn't do a thing. The body found itself in a certain place at a certain time. And the ego mind, which is the storyteller that's trying to grab and shun, tells a story about how I did this. I went there and I acquired this and I chose that and I made the right decisions and I did X, Y, and Z and therefore I got this and therefore I'm worthy of worship and fame and fortune and therefore you should listen to me because I know, because I did. And that's all a false story. And so whether it's being sold as money and munitions, or as magic and metaphysics, it's all the same thing. Because when you finally come into cosmic consciousness, awareness, Christ consciousness, awareness of the true eternal self, even though leading up to that point, there was an incredible experience of suffering and struggling and striving and choosing and losing, not getting, getting, and then losing. The whole panorama of the theater, of the cinema. When you finally come up to that final door, if you will, and you go through it, you come into the truth of who and what you really are. You see that it was grace that was carrying you through all along, even as you believed, I'm doing it because I'm choosing and I'm deciding and I did this and they didn't do that, and if they only did this and if I had done this or if I hadn't done this, or the whole story, if they didn't do that then they'd be better and that's why I'm better because I did this and they did that and that's why they deserve to suffer and that's why I deserve this. Do you hear that? Do you hear where that comes from inside of the self? When you finally come to cosmic awareness or cosmic consciousness, God consciousness, your realization of your inseparable union with all that is, what you see in that moment is that everybody else is also in inseparable union with that. With God, with truth, with love, with life, with peace, with wisdom, with intelligence, whether they know it or not. And you see that right now, regardless of your story, regardless of how much you've suffered, or how much you've gained, or how much you've lost, regardless of any of that, this awareness is immediately available to everybody if only they choose it now. It doesn't matter what you've been through or haven't been through. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how much or how little, which becomes an irrelevant mode of comparison, you or anybody has suffered. You're not in control here. You're not in control here. And it's the salesmanship of the illusion of control that keeps people coming around and begging for something from people that have nothing to give, no capacity to give what it is you really want. Because finally, nobody can give you what you really want. Nobody can give it to you. Nobody can give it to you. It's already you. It's not simply yours, it is yours. But it's deeper than that. It's already you. It cannot be given to you, and it cannot be taken away from you. And in the realization of this, you see the tragic, the hilarious, but the tragic nature of the entire structure of the mind, which is mirrored in our whole so-called societal or civilizational structure, where everybody is basically running on greed and envy and hatred and the need to acquire, objectifying one another, so that our very sexuality is violent, and it's our violent sexual drive that keeps everybody. And then there's the forgetting that the truth of what we are, however you want to name the energy, is truly this thing of incredible and remarkable innocence and deep play. So that you see that the entire movement of the mind as violent acquisition, physically, sexually, financially, emotionally, mentally, experientially, which is all just the mind, it serves nothing. It serves nothing. It serves nothing. It serves nothing. Trauma, violence, suffering serves nothing. It serves absolutely nothing. 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 It is pointless. There is no need to suffer. No need to suffer. No need to suffer. No need to hate yourself. There's no need to hate. There's no need to hate, and there's no need to suffer. No need. Nothing. There's no need to endlessly chase in hopes that that will get you satisfied, and to run away from what's uncomfortable, or to run away from parts of yourself that you wish weren't there, because there are no parts. That's all compartmentalization, which is a false projection of the mind. You can drop it all. It doesn't serve to hold on to any of that whatsoever. And in this, you step out completely into the unknown. You don't need the passport anymore, because the passport was basically a hole punch card. And once you get all the holes punched in the card, you go up to the counter, you hand it in, and that's your ticket to freedom. But you have to give the ticket up. The conductor has to punch your ticket. So yes, at first, your passport gets stamped. The great cosmic conductor comes in and stamps your passport, gives you the cosmic stamp of enlightenment, of freedom, of truth, of godhood. And then that very passport is then taken and handed in. And then You step into true freedom because you can now actually go anywhere. You have to give the ticket to the conductor to get on the train. But the value of you travel to travel. You're going to go. Would you rather be in your spacecraft, so to speak? This body is your spaceship. This is your Vimana. This is your Merkaba. This is your enlightenment vehicle. This is your multi-dimensional traveling accoutrement. This is your ship. Would you rather be on the ship flying around, or would you rather be walking around showing everybody your stamp collection, your passport, your hole punch card, saying, look everybody, my hole punch card is filled up. Isn't this nice? Isn't this great? Wow, look at my card. Look at me. Look, I've got all my stamps. Who cares? Cash in your ticket, get in the plane and fly. Get in your vehicle and fly. Who cares? Who are you trying to impress? Other people that are still trying to get there? Who cares? So what? That could only be from the desire to get a cult following around you, which is an avoidance of the fact of being clear, of awakening, of flying, of being free, of actually moving into the truth. Because everybody that's actually in their multidimensional vehicles and flying them through this, space-time continuum, everybody who's actually in awareness of timelessness and therefore flying their vehicles, their spaceships, are not concerned with the people they're not impressed by anything. You can only impress an ego with that. You can't impress consciousness. Look at all my medals and my medallions and my trinkets and all the proof that I'm the best, whatever. That doesn't impress consciousness. It can only impress egos. And it impresses them because they have an inferiority complex, because they're comparing their stamp card to other people's stamp cards. And then some people, they get their stamp card almost filled up, and then they create a little club. This is a club for people that have their stamp card filled up or almost filled up. And then the people that don't have their stamp card filled up go, oh my God, I want to join that club. But why? The only thing to do is to fill up your stamp card and turn it in. If the stamp card, are you with me here on the metaphor still? If the stamp card is actually all filled up, and you just take that and turn that into let's now create a nice little club full of people with full stamp cards. That's just a club full of people who are too afraid to actually get on the ship and take the ride, but who want the social recognition of being eligible for the ride or being, top tier in something. It doesn't, there's no purpose to that because they're not actually capable of really engaging in anything that the other people aren't engaging in because you're still in the mind. It might be a special room in the mind where only people of a certain, progress are able to come into, and they can get up to whatever pleasurable or unpleasurable activities they get up to in there. And the people out here looking in go, oh, I want to be a part of that. But the people that are in there are just as miserable as the people that are out here. There's a temporary kick at being in this club and being in this group and being in the select few, the chosen few, where you can have you're, rather than being out here, now you're in here. And so now you're, having sex, drinking drugs, doing all the pleasurable things with all the other beautiful people, which is great. It's fine, cool, whatever. But it's no different than if this is your station or this is your station or this is your station. It's in the same field of mind. It can't actually take you beyond. And when you finally see that it's just another death trap, it's another death spiral, it may be a very pleasurable death spiral, but it's a death spiral. And so when you finally see that what you actually want is to be free, you actually want to be truly, truly free with no strings attached, with no fear of being accepted or rejected. You actually want to be free to pilot your ship. Then you see that the entire purpose of having your passport filled out and stamped and signed, and all of the holes punched in the card, is to cash that in. so that you can actually get into your ship and fly. And all the people that are up here flying openly, not concerned. In fact, what we want is to see everybody else get into their ships and fly. Get into your ship and fly. It doesn't matter whether the stamp card clicks. It's irrelevant. It's totally and completely irrelevant. You get into the ship and you fly. And what happens, not even what happens, but the very essence of flight is love. The very essence of flight is love. And when you look at the whole stamp card game, when you look at the whole field of the mind, it doesn't matter what room in the mind you set up shop or camp in, it's the mind. It's suffering. It's comparison. It's judgment. It's fear. It's hatred. There's no love. No freedom. So you can live in an iron cage, or a silver cage, or a platinum cage, or a golden cage. And some people, you can say, yes, of course, it's much more pleasurable and much more enjoyable to live in a golden cage, of course. Of course it is. Of course it is. Of course it is. Obviously. And it's still a cage. It's still a cage. So if you're still enjoying the activities of the cage, which are all there to just kind of keep you in the cage, there's nothing wrong with pleasure at all. There's nothing wrong with pain either. But when pleasure and pain are used as punishment and reward, that's being in the cage. Reward for what? Punishment for what? For not fulfilling the social roles as expected by others who demand those social roles be fulfilled for no other reason that they can continue to ignore their own pain. And so I'll reward you as long as you tickle me. I'll reward you with pleasure or satisfaction, all temporary, of course, as long as you keep me from having to feel or face the pain that I'm running from. Right? But the moment that I am brought face to face with the pain that I run from, I react to that pain with pain. Of course, that's how that works, that law of mirroring, as it's sometimes called. You're avoiding pain, you come into a mirror, that mirror reveals your pain to you, and then you react with pain, but you're just punching a mirror. And then you get a bloody hand, and then you blame the mirror because you have a bloody hand, even though you punched it out of reaction because it showed you what you were trying to avoid. And so it doesn't matter how great any particular pleasure or sequence or series of pleasures appear to look from the outside in, if it's just a cover over a deeper pain, it's useless, and it's a part of a continuation of that same pain. It doesn't matter how glorified or exalted that particular pleasure palace is, or who the chieftain is, or the sultan, or the emperor, or whoever it is that's apparently conducting that pleasure palace. And of course, underneath it all, finally, you see that there is only one reality, and that's God. And once you actually see that and discover that, well, then you can go anywhere because you're not caught in anything. You can be witness to anything, to pleasure, to pain, and it doesn't catch you. You don't get tripped up on it because you see it's a choice. If you want to suffer, you're free to suffer. If you want to believe in the reality of the illusion, the ultimate reality of it, there's a superficial reality to it. You know, this is an illusion, but it's an illusion of flesh, blood, and bone. It's made of light. This is all light condensed. Everything is made of light. And light is sound. Sound is light. This is all light sound. Sound light. You can call it condensed, but condensed relative to what? Relative to this body? We treat the density of the human body as kind of the base nature, And then we'll talk about something being less dense or more dense than the human body, but that's just because the body's here, and the body's being used as the base point of reference because that's what's known. But the minute you know that which is beyond the body, that which is the source of the body is no longer seen as the de facto base reference point for reality in any way. You're still aware of it as relative in appearance, and therefore of the relativeness of everything else in relation to this, but you're furthermore aware of the relationship between the body and all form in all of its spectra of appearance in the field as finite reality, appearing and disappearing within the eternal truth, reality, essence of the formless itself, which is pure love, pure truth, pure peace. And when the physicality comes into contact with it, there's great ecstasy. Laughter, tears, and an awareness of peace, an awareness of love that doesn't come and go. And in that you see, oh, it's right here, it's always been right here. There's nowhere to go to get it.